Next, let's add a bit more color to our scene. So I'm going to select one of the cubes. Going down to the material area, I notice it has a main color, yet I cannot change anything in this area. And that's because it's using a default diffuse material. So let's create our own material to replace the default that the cubes currently have. I'm going to right click on assets, then create, and then material. I'll hit enter. And now I can do this a couple different ways. The first I'm going to show you is just dragging it on. And it has no effect because the main color is still white. So I'm going to change that to red. And the other way of changing the material is to scroll down. And inside the mesh renderer under materials, I can drag it in there as well. Now, I'd like to have each of these cubes have a separate color. So I'm going to add another material. And this one I'm going to make green. Okay. Each of these materials requires a shader, and by default, the shader is set to diffuse. The diffuse shader requires a main color, which we set to red in this case. And it also can take a texture. So I'm going to hit select, and by default we'll see a default particle texture that comes with Unity and the light map we created earlier. So you can see the effect it has on our object, but for now I'll set it to none. Now, so our scene is not being blocked by this light bulb. I'm going to switch 3D gizmos to off. And I'll demonstrate a couple other common shaders. So let's say we wanted to make one of our objects semi-transparent. When we open up main color, we notice there's an alpha over here. Yet, when I bring down the alpha, it has zero effect on our object. But if I were to change the shader to something that supported transparency, such as transparent diffuse, we would see that the alpha is being used to make the object semi-transparent or fully transparent. So for the next shader demonstration, I'm going to add a new game object, in this case a sphere, and I'm going to drag in the green material, reset its position, and drag it near our light. Now if I set the shader from diffuse to specular, notice that when the light hits the object, it adds a bit of color. So if I switch this to, let's say, yellow, you can see the shine is now colored. And the amount of shine can be controlled as well. So this would be something very glossy, such as a wet object, or something softer, such as metal. So for our next shader demo, I'm going to need a normal map. So I've gone ahead and downloaded one. It's this brick bubble texture right here. So to use it, we'll head over to our green texture, and we'll use a bumped diffuse shader, which takes in a normal map. So I can just drag that in. So the normal map makes the sphere appear as if it has lots of intricate details within its 3D mesh. The polygon count of the sphere has not changed, so it's all being done through the bump map shader we just set on our material. Now we can combine the effects of the second last shader I showed you, which is specular, with bumped map, and we end up with bumped specular. So you can see it's got a bit more of an effect. It really brings out the edges and the contours, and I'll move the light again to showcase that. Okay, so that should give you a good idea of the common shaders. Now the last thing with materials I'd like to show you is the ability to use multiple materials in one object. So in the sphere, we just need to go over to the mesh renderer, open up the materials area, and type in 2 for size, so we have 2, and then we can just drag in our red material. So now it's got a combination of both. So you can see that the red is not as powerful as the green because it does have an alpha. So if I bring that down, you can see it's making the block transparent and making the sphere fully green.